Hi, this is Karen Roy, and I am doing a podcast with a good friend of mine for Life Possible with a Disability, and his name is David Linaker. We connected over social media, and everything he puts up resonates with me, like hits me right in my soul. And so I feel like we've become good friends. And graciously, I will say that this podcasting thing is new for me. And this will be the third time this sweet soul has agreed to record with me now that my son has figured out my sound issue. So very thankful for his kindness and patience. So David lives in Salisbury in England. So again, coordinating this, not the easiest with lots of time zones in between us. And he has a really interesting history, career, and all of these experiences have kind of given him just a special view of life. He's been, do they call it minister in the Church of England, or is
yes, I was a priest in the Church of England. Yes,
priest. Yeah, and he's worked with people with disabilities in the past, which is kind of part of our link and connection. He is a life coach, so he takes all of these past experiences and helps people sort of live their best life possible, right? So that fits right in with the theme of this podcast. So without further ado, David, I will let you introduce yourself.
Well, hi, Karen. It's really nice to be with you again. It's lovely to have an excuse to have another conversation. It's absolutely fantastic. Yeah, it's a bit of a challenge. You're just starting your day, and I'm coming to the end of mine. I'm desperately in need of a cup of tea as we enjoy over here. Yes. It's really good to be with you. Karen and I connected on courtesy of Instagram, really, and her very positive vibe, I think, kind of resonated with what I was putting out there, and so we had a conversation which led us to today. And just to give you an idea of my background, as I was born and brought up on a little island just off the south of England called the Isle of Wight, which is where Queen Victoria used to hang out for quite a lot of the time, about 100 and a bit years ago. And when I was growing up, when I was very little, my paternal grandfather, who I was very, very close to, became a double leg amputee. And so really, when I was a small boy, I mean, I used to crawl up underneath his wheelchair and tickle the end of his stumps when he was asleep, which used to annoy the hell out of him. And I used to post pencils into the screw holes on the sides of his artificial legs. So when he stood up, he rattled.
Wow.
But he took it all in good part. And for me, disability was just part of the everyday life, and actually led to things which tended to be more funny than tragic. And so that, I suppose, just formed a kind of attitude in my mind. When I was 4.5, my mum sadly died, and that meant that the family sort of blew apart a little bit. And I ended up eventually being brought up by my paternal grandmother, my dear old grandfather having died. And then I went through the usual kind of school bullying stuff and all of that, and had a pretty rubbish time through that, and some difficult family stuff. But in the end, what that gave me, I just count myself incredibly lucky, because what it gave me was experience. And as someone very wisely said once upon a time, experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. And I find that so helpful. And I think generally approaching life with a fairly well-developed sense of humour also helps. But I then, when I started training for ministry in the Church of England, I had the wonderful opportunity of going to do an extended placement study at the National Spinal Injuries Centre at Stoke Mandeville, which is just north of London. and very much the leading unit in this country. And that was a fascinating place, and I met all sorts of really interesting people. And what it gave me was an absolute fascination for what makes for resilience. I mean, I often, I have met through certainly in my years in ministry, I've met some very, very damaged people, but sometimes they're not quite as damaged as I think I am sometimes. And I kind of wonder why it is I never ended up kind of rocking in a corner somewhere, but it never happened to me. And I think those early experiences of watching what resilience looked like in my grandfather and my grandmother, and then my family as my mother became ill and died, and all of those sorts of things, and then getting to practice some of that through school and school experiences, I came to a kind of understanding of what it means to be resilient, and so then being able to observe people who've gone through a very immediate trauma and how they approach their lives on the other side of that trauma was utterly fascinating. And that combined then with a lot of study and a lot of thinking has led me to some ideas about what resilience looks like, that I use very, very regularly with clients. Yeah, that's kind of me.
That's why we titled this segment "Living More Than a 2-Paragraph Life," and because and tied into the idea of so some of our listeners are going to be people who acquired their disability. Some were born with it. Very different perspectives, right, on how they handle that. Mine was acquired, gunshot wound to the back when I was 19. So I knew what it was like to walk, and I was very cognizant of like having been normal to then being like what I considered at first to be damaged, to be imperfect. What I've learned over the years is really to embrace my differentness and kind of see it as a superpower. But I think that your perspective on, there's sometimes when people handle things very differently at the beginning based off of we talked about this before, childhood experiences. How did you grow up, and what's your basic disposition? Is your glass half full or is it half empty? But I think the message that we're trying to drive home is like, even if your disposition maybe was to have a glass half empty, there are ways to turn that around. And then I think it's interesting that, we get one life and we have really no choices as to like what rolls in, and some of it's beautiful, some of it's terrible. And for some of us, you may feel like we got an extra dose of battering, I guess, during this lifetime. But your perspective on the end of life, and basically giving, I guess, what we call a eulogy. I don't know if it's the same in England.
Yeah. So one of the other part of my life is, as well as being a life coach, I'm an independent celebrant. So what I do is I officiate at funerals, and what that means is, it's an incredibly privileged position to be in, because you listen to an awful lot of eulogies. So I listen to around about 250 to 300 eulogies a year. And that means that you get a perspective on what a good life well lived looks like. And also you get a perspective on what a life that has been marred by anger or frustration or fear looks like. And that's where the 2-paragraph thing comes from, because I will often see families of elderly ladies, usually, who have died, and that they may be nearly 100 years old, and you say to the family, right, okay, tell me all about her. What was she like? And they'll sort of go, well, she was just a normal lady, really. She cooked good dinner. And you're kind of can you not think of a little bit more to say about a life that spanned 100 years? And so that was why I kind of married that up with my other fascination for what makes human beings tick, in wanting to help people live as essentially a life that is as many paragraphs as they want to make it, that it's their choice. They don't have to be trapped into someone else's definition of who they are. And that's particularly acute for those with a visible disability who inevitably encounter other people's perceptions and projections as a result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I took a long time down the road of, I very quickly adapted to using the wheelchair. I didn't really want to incorporate it much into like my persona. Like I so much in those early years wanted people like, I am still me. I only want you to see me. If invisible is a color choice of wheelchairs, that is the color I want, because I need people to know that I am the same. Yeah. I am the same. But as time has gone on, I've really learned to embrace it, it's given me such purpose. It's given me, in this body, although I can't walk or run a marathon, I've had 3 children. I've worked an amazing job. I've tried new sports. Like I've jumped out of an airplane. Yeah. I've done a lot of fun things. And so I've become to embrace it, but some people with disabilities who fairly early on, figured it out quicker than I did. But I will give myself a bit of a break and say that I got shot in 1987 where I couldn't see influencers and I couldn't model my disabled life or my differently abled life around someone else. I lived in an able-bodied community where I felt like almost the only disabled person in my community. And so I was the term ableist that we use, where I had internalized a lot of that. I didn't want my employer or my friends to think I am just like you. So I would kill myself hiding my disability to the best of my ability. Absolutely. And downplaying it. So, but a couple of remarkable women that embrace their disability early and have kind of made a career out of it. I
do. I mean, absolutely stunning. But I think you're right. I mean, you do have to cut yourself a little bit of slack because 1987 was effectively the Stone Age as far as understanding spinal cord injury in terms of an active life was concerned. But no, I mean, I regularly interact with Heidi Herkus, who is a stylist and can be found on Instagram. We'll maybe put her links in the show notes. And
yes, definitely.
She is remarkable. She has a high level spinal cord injury, but it's absolutely stunning and incredibly wise. Posts a lot of amazing stuff on Instagram, and I think is only about 5 years out from injury. But definitely a person who had,
it's like a baby.
She went into it with a resilience, and it's that which carried her through. And she had some incredibly good and inspiring help, I know, in the spinal unit that she attended at Stanmore. And so there's lots of wisdom that she can share, and I think she'd make an absolutely amazing guest on the podcast. And the other person that I'm just blown away by at the moment is somebody called Claire Danson, who is a triathlete. And she had a really nasty cycling accident. She's paraplegic, and she's already, I think she's a couple of years out, something like that. And she's already handbiking, swimming, and doing the things that enable her to be part of a triathlon team. It's absolutely stunning.
Oh yeah, I will definitely look her up and we'll share that with the audience, because I think we're all kind of, that the community, we draw inspiration from each other. This, living with a disability, like it's no piece of cake. Like there's a lot to it. And, for people with spinal cord injury, there may be intermittent catheterization involved. There's a lot of other things involved that I think I spent my life like downplaying. Not that I upplay it now, but I mean, like I cut myself a little more slack. I mean, I was killing myself to basically kind of hide my disability and prove that I was just as good of a mother, just as good of an employee. I love it when people are able to find their community. So it sounds like Heidi and Claire, they kind of knew who they were going into their acquired injury. And then they quickly made an adjustment and found their place again. Right. And so, for some people that's sports. And for some people, like I did, advocacy was kind of my thing. I'm a social worker by background. So I found the Miss Wheelchair America organization, but I will tell you in the early days when I wasn't embracing my disability, I was like, you want me to roll around in a wheelchair with a crown on my head and talk to people? Like never happening. I literally said something to the effect of when hell freezes over. So, but totally ate those words later on because I realized I was like, you know what, whatever I have to do to get this message out, if it requires wearing a sparkly object on my head, I will do it. And so I found that organization and it's women who are advocates. And, that was, it changed the trajectory of my, of my life, really, my whole life. So let's see, so for people who are maybe struggling and their life circumstances are not the same as mine and Heidi and Claire, where we know our place in the world and, that kind of thing. And they maybe they lost their career because of their disability. And now they're like, who am I if I'm not a construction worker, or who, and what's your advice for people struggling in that way?
To remember is that we are the product of an amazing evolutionary journey, the majority of which was spent on the African savannah, trying not to be lunch for lions. And the way we did that was that we worked in community, we worked with our tribe. And I think you hit the nail on the head just now when you talked about the advocates. That was your tribe. And I think it's really important to find your tribe. Mm-hmm. If you have defined yourself in a particular way to be part of a particular tribe and you no longer fit because of what's happened, you're going to have to take a little bit of time to find your new tribe. But I can absolutely assure people that that tribe exists. It may just take a bit of finding. Yeah. And there are amazing charities. And I know the moment I say that word, newly injured people are going to say, I'm not getting involved with charities. But there are some amazing organizations run by people with disabilities who are able to find something in you which you probably never even knew you had before, but which will enable you to find a new tribe.
Right.
And then, in the context of that tribe, just as human beings have always done, then you look for your vision, values, and your purpose. What's you create a new
the three pillars, right?
You create a new vision for your life. And that'll take time. You rely on values that you've always had. And if your values have always been about externals, then you're going to do a bit of work because you need to find the values inside. And then you will begin to develop and evolve a sense of purpose exactly as you have. I mean, it's precisely the pattern that you followed. Yeah. And I think, and so then to take a step back and to say, well, how do you get to a point where you can create that vision, to do that internal work? Well, that's where resilience comes in, and resilience can be learned. if you're lucky, you've got it already and you've got some of the ingredients already, but it can be learnt. And the Harvard Business Review did some study into this, and they identified another 3 pillars. I do like threes. They're nice and easy to remember. They're brilliant to remember.
3 is a great number.
Their 3 was acceptance, meaning, and the one I love, bricolage, which is a French word. And so accept what's happened and accept it quickly. Because denial is the biggest enemy of resilience. You may think you're fighting, but what you're actually doing is you're blocking. So accept quickly, then begin to look for meaning. You'll need wise people around you. The really brilliant thing, of course, about trauma is it tells you who your true friends are, because all the rest of them disappear, but with the cloud of dust behind
quickly,
them, and that's fine. Great.
Yeah. It's also a great way to decide if you're dating, you're not in a significant relationship. It's a great way to
you bet,
eliminate jerks, whether those be male or female, because you're like, if their first glance at me is like, oh my God, I don't want to deal with that. Like, well, bye. Because I'm amazing.
Don't let the door hit you in the bum on the way out. And bye. You're already weeding out the people who are going to be no use to you. Find good people. Look for people who've been there before you, and they will become your tribe. And in the context of that, you will find meaning for what's happened. I mean, I remember having an absolutely amazing conversation with Heidi, where she said, I wouldn't want to be disabled. Why would I? That would be mad. But there is absolutely no way I would trade. If I could turn the clock back to before my accident, I would not do it. Because if I did, I'd have to unmeet a whole load of brilliant people I've met. I'd have to unlearn a whole load of amazing lessons I've learned. Right. And I just thought that was such a wise take on it.
I agree.
And then bricolage, my favourite word.
It is.
Bricolage is the French word for taking lots and lots of bits and putting them together and making something new. And so you will have brought with you through life loads of experiences, loads of things you've done, loads of things that have happened, loads of people you've acquired throughout life. Now's the opportunity to put them together and mix them up and see what comes out. And something new and fresh,
I love that,
and life-giving nearly always comes out. It's the alchemy.
Yeah, absolutely love that. The alchemy. So wait, there was a quote that you gave that I think that would be a good way to sort of we'll end it and conclude. So we've got a couple things going. Our 2-paragraph life is, we've got to, accept.
Find meaning.
And that was the second one, where you find your tribe. Find meaning by finding your tribe, and then bricolage. You take all of these pieces of who you are and put them together and create something new and beautiful. And I think if you do that, you will definitely have a great eulogy. I will say, some friends of mine, they owned a hair salon. It was like a husband and wife couple. The husband, like maybe 60, fell through. They were moving, and he went to the attic and he fell and he had a brain bleed and he passed away. This person was diverse in a lot of ways, but when not at work, an absolute party. Like, they had a place in New Orleans, they have a place here. These people knew how to have fun. Like, his life was a celebration. And I just saw last night on Instagram, she had a basic, what does she call it? Ken Fest.
That's brilliant. I love it.
And they had a huge party in New Orleans, music and alcohol flowing. And it was just such a, it's what I want. I'm not quite as colorful as Ken was, but that's what I want. I want a party. I want people to celebrate I want people to look back on this life and think on mine and think, okay, she lived it
Absolutely.
well and she was happy. And I think that's can be done. And then tell me again that quote. What was it? The thing that when you learn something about learning,
experience is what you get when you don't get what you want.
It was at the very beginning.
Was that it?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I think that we don't get what we want all the time. That doesn't, I mean, outside of the fact that, anyone can acquire a disability at any moment, right? It's the club that anyone can join in 5 minutes.
It doesn't discriminate.
There's a lot of other things that. No, unfortunately or fortunately, like you bet, get ready.
And
there's a lot of other things that don't go well in life either.
And you name it. They're very non-discriminating clubs, and suddenly you can find yourself a member. And but the good news is these days, as opposed to the 1980s, it's so much easier to find a life coach or a peer support group or whatever who will help you to move through that process. Because there's a lovely, I don't know whether you're familiar over there with an author called Michael Rosen, but he wrote a children's book called We're Going on a Bear Hunt. And the refrain that each time they come up against an obstacle, they say, oh, we can't go over it, we can't go round it, we've got to go through it. And it's just such a good way of looking at life.
Yeah, wow, profound. Profound. So tell us how the listeners can get in touch with you, because for your life coach skills, and then I think you also run a group that people can possibly join. So tell us how to find you.
Life coach, and I love working with clients all over the world. And thanks to Zoom, that's all possible now, and various other platforms are available. I am on Facebook, David Linaker Coach, and I am on Instagram, David Linaker Coach, and I also have a Facebook group which is called The Untamed Life. And it would be fabulous to have new members. It's a really good little group of folk who share all sorts of ideas and thoughts about living a really positive and full life.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for doing this for the third time, and not the last, but at least next time we will have
I'm really looking forward to being back with you.
You're amazing.
And in the meantime, thank you for this opportunity. It's been lovely. Really enjoyed myself.
Yeah. All right. Well, have a good evening over there, and I'll talk to you again soon. All right. Bye. Bye.